A catastrophic ocean storm rages through the Atlantic, threatening everything in its path.
I've never seen a storm this large, this vicious.
How can you predict its course?
We were watching the barometer and looking at the weather, and we knew that it was going to get a lot worse.
How can you save those at sea?
We're not going to make it. There's no way we're going to make it.
How will you survive extreme conditions?
Don't do anything, people will die. Attempt to rescue even more people can die.
Test your knowledge, strategy, and instincts facing the perfect storm when nature strikes. October 1991. It's fall in New England, a busy time for many seaside communities. Recreational boaters prepare to set sail for warmer climates in the south. At the fishing village of Gloucester, Massachusetts, mariners get to work and hit the high seas. Sword fishing season is at its peak. For many willing to brave the seas, sword fishing can be a lucrative profession. But as this Gloucester memorial to those lost at sea attests, it's also a deadly one.
We live our life right on the edge of danger all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many close calls of life and death I've had. It kind of gives you a little spook at the beginning, but I'll tell you, we didn't stop hauling the line.
On October 25th, the 6-man crew of the Alegria Gale prepare to return to Gloucester. They've been sword fishing for weeks near the Grand Banks, a dangerous maritime area southeast of Nova Scotia, known for abundant swordfish. The Alegria Gales had a good haul, and the men, including 30-year-old Bobby Shatford, are ready to come home. Bobby's sister Mary Ann remembers he was anxious even before the ship left the port.
I knew he was apprehensive about going out. More than one fisherman said to me, well, Mary Ann, no one ever wants to go fishing. You get in the boat, you're uptight, you're anxious. I just think that, you know, people don't eagerly hop on a boat to go out fishing for 30 days, especially my brother, because it really wasn't in his blood. Leaving a safe harbor is always hard for any fisherman.
In the past weeks out at sea, the Alegria Gale crew met with chilly winds, but otherwise calm conditions. But 2 days later, as the Alegria Gale heads west, Captain Billy Tyne radios the Canadian Coast Guard. He says he's facing heavy weather on the horizon. The Alegria Gale is about to collide with a phenomenal North Atlantic Ocean storm of epic proportions.
It was this really warm, calm day, and it was very strange. There was a very weird feel in the air.
Back on the coast, the weather is deceptively clear. The only clues that a tremendous weather system is gathering out at sea are coming in through first-hand reports, radioed in from ships, offshore weather buoys, and satellite imagery. The National Weather Service watches in disbelief. A meteorological monster is taking shape before their very eyes.
So I was one of 3 forecasters that was making the decisions for the high seas forecast of winds and waves for the western North Atlantic. Our numerical guidance, each subsequent run of the numerical guidance was telling us that this really was going to be a significant event.
From the south, Hurricane Grace is moving up the Atlantic coast. Hurricanes are fueled by moist tropical air. When they hit land, the supply of tropical ocean air is cut off, and they eventually lose their punch. But instead of continuing its course over land, Hurricane Grace skirts the coast, then heads offshore again, building momentum.
Grace was accelerating to the northeast. We now had 40, 50, 60 knots of wind over a very, very large area over the western Atlantic.
From the northwest, a Canadian cold front is pushing toward the east. It's then followed by a high-pressure system. Meanwhile, off the coast near Sable Island, a low-pressure system stalls and builds. The air rises and condenses, bringing winds, creating rain and stormy conditions, a potential powder keg of unstable air.
When you have very cold air flowing over relatively warm water, and there's such a difference between the air and the water in temperature that you're able to pull moisture right off of the water very, very quickly. You get an overturning of the atmosphere, basically a violent overturning.
And now, Hurricane Grace starts to head directly into these systems. On their own, these three systems can bring very nasty weather, including storms and heavy winds. But if they collide, it could mean disaster. In this mix, which of these three individual weather systems is potentially the most dangerous? Hurricane Grace. It may strengthen as it moves north. The cold front. It's bringing heavy winds. The Sable Island low-pressure system. It's stalled and continues to build. As Hurricane Grace moves north, it's cut off from warm water, therefore losing strength. The Canadian cold front can bring winds, but normally these winds would continue east. But the Sable Island low pressure is stalled and building and may collide with the other moving systems, creating a highly volatile and unpredictable storm. The National Weather Service's worst fears begin to materialize. The cold front moves east, knocking into the Sable Island low pressure. Then, Hurricane Grace collides with the two unstable systems. It's an Armageddon of ocean storms.
This was definitely marine, major impact. One of the worst storms in the Northwest Atlantic, no question about it.
And there's one more surprise. Most New England storms ride the Gulf Stream out deeper into the Atlantic. But this storm is now turning around, moving backwards, what meteorologists call retrograding, and is headed straight for the coast.
Most storms move from southwest to northeast. That's why they're called nor'easters. I've never seen a storm this large, this vicious, and move this far west, and didn't really capture the imagination of a lot of people because it was sunny.
But for the United States Coast Guard, the size of the ocean storm and its unusual path means an immediate call to action.
The National Weather Service was predicting 100-mile-an-hour winds, 60-foot waves. But some of the recreational vessels, they're looking at the blue skies and the sunshine. So they might not have taken the warning seriously. We took it seriously.
On October 29th, a desperate mayday comes in.
Now, best take no water 50 miles off Cape Ann.
It's from the Satori, a 32-foot sailboat 100 miles south of Nantucket. The three people on board are fearing for their lives.
I mean, they've rolled about 90 degrees. They damaged their rigging. Their life rafts washed over the side. They're drenched with the cold ocean water. Now, hypothermia can kill you because the water is 25 times more efficient at removing body heat than air.
The Coast Guard sends out a Falcon jet and H-3 helicopter to help the Satori. Meanwhile, the Tamaroa, a 205-foot Coast Guard cutter, braves the torrential 35-foot sea swells to assist in the rescue mission.
We were watching the barometer and looking at the weather, and we knew that it was going to get a lot worse.
In less extreme weather, the H-3 helicopter would lower a hoist basket to the boat in peril, load the crew one by one, then haul them up and out of danger. But in this storm, fierce winds are dashing all hopes of a safe air rescue.
There's the risk of wrapping the basket around the rigging of the sailboat. Of course, when that happens, the pilots will immediately cut the cable because they never like being attached to the boat. But once you cut the cable, you're out of the rescue business. It gets worse. There's no second chance.
This means the Tamaroa will have to rescue the crew trapped on the sailboat. The cutter departs anchorage and transits through the narrow Cape Cod Canal en route to the sailboat.
We were rolling. It was pretty rough out. The wind was blowing at a pretty good rate.
Even with help from the strong waves and currents, it takes the Tamaroa nearly 12 hours to reach the Satori sailboat. But then Commander Beucke gets a call that could shut down the entire rescue mission. The captain of the Satori says he will not abandon his ship. You are leading a rescue mission. What's the best option when a captain stubbornly refuses to abandon ship? Evacuate the ship's crew. Get an order from the Coast Guard that demands everyone off. Tow the boat, throw them a line, and haul them back at their own risk. Abandon the operation. Halt the rescue and threaten prosecution for reporting a false mayday. Because the weather system is so bad, the cutter cannot safely tow a boat out of the storm's way. And abandoning the operation, leaving those in peril behind, goes against the Coast Guard's sworn duty to save lives. The commander requests a manifestly unsafe voyage from the Coast Guard's District 1, which mandates an evacuation. At the scene, Commander Beucke orders a 21-foot inflatable rescue boat to be lowered to the sea. The three-man Coast Guard team will first deliver cold weather survival suits to the stranded sailboat crew, then help them board the inflatable rescue boat. But the strong currents create major problems.
Sailboat slides off a wave, lands on the bow of the rigid hull inflatable, blows out the forward pontoon, so there's nothing really to protect our boat crew as they head directly into the sea.
The rescue attempt has gone horribly wrong. 3 Coast Guard crew now struggle to stay afloat, and as the storm rapidly approaches, the waves and winds intensify.
The weather was significantly worse than when we put the boat in the water. We're a 205-foot long, 1,600-ton ship, and we're rolling terribly now. Someone could be hurt or killed.
Next, 6 lives are on the line. It all comes down to one man's ability to brave the monstrous waves. October 30th, 1991. A massive storm rages through the Atlantic, churning 35-foot waves and devastating winds. As the storm lurches toward the eastern seaboard, the Coast Guard scrambles to save a sailboat called the Satori. But their inflatable vessel, filled with a 3-man rescue team, collides with a sailboat and begins to sink.
They were knee-deep in seawater and the engine compartment was flooded. Probably the first time that was presented to me as far as somebody could die.
An H-3 Coast Guard helicopter hovers above. Severe winds cause the helicopter pilot to rule out lowering the hoist basket directly onto the sailboat. The only option is for rescue swimmer Dave Moore to jump into the rolling seas. At 24 years old, this will be his first major rescue.
I was still in the back of the helicopter, and then I heard our pilot say that, okay, well, we'll get ready to perform a rescue using the rescue swimmer. I realized that obviously now I have to pay attention.
He must swim against strong currents to each of the 6 people. First, he heads for the sailboat crew.
It's very easy to lose somebody in a chaotic ocean like that.
You are a rescue swimmer. Where should you direct the sailboat crew? Stay on the sailboat. The boat will serve as a reference. Hold on to the Coast Guard inflatable boat. Keeping the victims together will expedite the rescue. Keep them in the water and away from both boats. They'll be easier to rescue if they're floating alone. In this situation, if the crew stays on the sailboat, the hoist basket may get trapped in the mast. And the Coast Guard inflatable boat is already sinking fast. The best option under these dire circumstances is to tell the sailboat crew to jump into the water, where the rescue swimmer will swim to them and help hoist them up one by one.
I don't want to take on the extra risk of putting 3 more people from the sailboat into the damaged small boat. It's enough for them to handle by themselves.
Wearing a neoprene dry suit, life vest, mask, and a snorkel as his only breathing apparatus, Moore jumps straight into the 35-foot waves and makes his way toward the sailboat crew. Immediately, there's trouble.
You can't see in those kind of seas when you're down in the trough of the swells. You can't see anything except straight up. So you swim until you get to the top of the swell and you stop, you look around and gain your bearings, and then you continue to swim down. the backside of the swell.
Dave Moore tried swimming to them and realized not only is he not making progress, he's going in the wrong direction. So the helicopter picked him up and had to bring him in a lot closer.
Finally, Moore reaches the sailboat crew.
They said, you know, is everybody okay, and who needs to go first? And they just kind of looked at each other, and one of them just raised her hand. So I grab her, turn her around. We swim back towards the direction of the helicopter.
And they hoist him up to the helicopter, and they do this one by one until all three people are up in the helicopter.
But Moore's work isn't finished just yet.
I get back into the helicopter, I turn around, and the flight mechanic's looking at me, and he's motioning to his ears to come up on the headset. So I put the headset on, and I had forgotten about the Coast Guard guys, but they are completely adrift, and they have no way to get back to their boat. We have 3 more rescues to do there.
Despite the crashing waves and 80-mile-per-hour winds, Dave Moore rescues all 6 people. The H-3 helicopter heads back to Air Station Cape Cod. The Coast Guard cutter also prepares to return to safe harbor before the brunt of the storm catches them.
Well, we complete the rescue mission, and we're headed back into port, thinking we are done for the day.
By mid-afternoon on October 30th, the perfect storm continues to retrograde toward the coast. By this time, most mariners had returned to port or avoided its course further out to sea. But one crew of sword fishermen has yet to be heard from. The men of the Andrea Gale. 2 days ago, Captain Billy Tyne had radioed other boats, including Richard Haworth, former captain of the Andrea Gale.
I had a channel set up with Billy in the beginning when we first went out. That I talked to him a little bit on a single sideband, but then I never got him again. He had gone further east, so I couldn't pick him up.
Billy Tyne had told fellow mariners that he needed to get back to Gloucester fast before his several thousand pounds of swordfish spoiled. So he plotted his quickest route home. The Andrea Gale would skirt dangerously close to Sable Island, a shallow area known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. He had no idea Sable Island would also be ground zero for this catastrophic storm.
In the area where the Andrea Gale was, conditions deteriorated very, very rapidly.
One witness to these drastically changing conditions is a Canadian weather buoy. Weather buoys measure wind speed, wave height, sea surface temperatures, and wave direction, then send the data by satellite to the National Weather Service.
We also get the direction of the swell, how much of that wave is swell, and the period, how fast they're coming at us. So the longer the period, has an indication to us about energy and translation speeds, etc. So we take all this information, digest it, put it into the models, and helps give us a reasonably accurate forecast.
One buoy, just 70 miles east of Sable Island, sends data that shows a sudden and very violent shift in the sea. It paints a grim picture of what the Andrea Gale may have encountered.
The peak waves, the highest waves recorded by one buoy in particular, went from about 11 feet to 50 feet in a matter of just a couple of hours.
The last time anyone heard from the Andrea Gale was around 6 in the evening on Monday, October 28th. Then, absolute silence. But if the Andrea Gale's in trouble, why no Mayday?
And I called the Coast Guard. There was no communication with the Andrea Gale, and they were trying to just see if they were okay, that they were going to go out and search for them.
Even if the Andrea Gale lost its antenna, there's an emergency communication device on board called the Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon, or EPIRB. When a ship sinks, these early generation devices require the captain to manually turn the EPIRB to the on position, which immediately sends out a distress signal. But so far, there's no EPIRB call from the Andrea Gale.
And they were just hoping and praying that they lost all their radios and everything during the storm, but they were okay.
Coming up, a rescue helicopter runs out of fuel, forcing the crew to make a drastic decision to crash land into the ocean. October 30th, 1991. A never-before-seen weather phenomenon roars through the western North Atlantic Ocean. It's the perfect storm, 5 times the size of the devastating Hurricane Andrew, whipping the sea into a frenzy of 80-mile-per-hour winds and towering 6-story tall waves. The United States Coast Guard responds to a flurry of maydays. One call, however, from a stranded sailboat is more than 250 miles off the Long Island coast, beyond the range of their H-3 helicopters.
Most people don't drown, they die from exposure.
The Coast Guard immediately contacts the Air National Guard to help an anchored sailboat and its frightened captain. The Air National Guard specializes in military rescues, but in times of natural disasters, they come to the aid of civilians in distress. Because of the distance, they dispatch an H-60 helicopter along with a C-130 tanker plane. The C-130 can refuel the H-60 helicopter mid-air, allowing for long-distance flights. Graham Beucke is the H-60 co-pilot.
You have an 80-foot hose that comes out either wingtip of the C-130, left or right side, and it has a funnel-shaped basket on the end of it that we plug the air refueling probe that you see on the front of the helicopter into that basket. We take gas when we're flying.
Also on board is pilot Dave Ruvola, flight engineer Jim Mioli, and 2 highly trained pararescue jumpers, Rick Smith and John Spillane.
Pararescue jumpers, they're the manly men of the Air Force.
On the way to the Japanese sailboat in distress, the C-130 refuels the H-60 helicopter twice. In just over an hour, they reach the sailboat. Already it's growing dark. Conditions for a safe rescue are becoming more dangerous by the minute.
We had our night vision goggles on. They work by magnifying existing light, and if there's not a lot of existing light to magnify, they don't work very well.
You are the Air National Guard helicopter pilot flying in these conditions. What's the best way to conduct a night ocean rescue? Proceed quickly. You have limited fuel and the storm could get worse. Wait for help. Call for additional helicopters to provide high-intensity spotlights. Return later. Note the location and return at first light. With these storm conditions, proceeding with the rescue will endanger both the parajumper and the individual. Even if you wait for additional spotlights, it will be easy to lose sight of the parajumper in the rolling waves. Although the individual is scared, the boat is anchored and not sinking, so the crew decides to return in the morning.
But that turned out to be a pretty good decision because he was picked up the following day by a Turkish freighter. We air refueled a 3rd time and started pressing home.
The Air National Guard H-60 and C-130 begin their flight back to the coast. Night is falling fast and headwinds are increasing, and they have no idea they're headed directly into the jaws of the storm. For flight engineer Jim Mioli, who's in the back of the helicopter, the rough ride's just beginning.
We were literally hanging on to the straps in the helicopter and getting bounced off the ceiling while trying to scan on night vision goggles, and it was really tough.
And I've been flying in nasty weather before, but I've never seen weather like this. It caught us by surprise, and our ground speed was showing about 30 knots. Well, we're flying along in 120 knots, and we've only got 30 knots of ground speed. We got a 90-knot headwind that we're flying into.
What's worse, the helicopter is quickly running out of fuel. In 90-knot winds, plugging the fuel probe into the H-60's tank is like threading a needle in a wind tunnel.
Well, that hose was all over the sky.
Desperate, co-pilot Beucke radios the C-130 tanker to seek a higher altitude, where they'll attempt to refuel above the worst of the storm.
We were at about anywhere from 500 to 1,000 feet trying to air refuel. Winds at this point in the evening were over 100 knots, so that's well over 100 miles an hour.
That was kind of harrowing in itself because Now we went into the clouds, lost sight of the tanker, lost an engine. They had to break off from us, and by that time our fuel level lights were flashing.
It becomes apparent that we're not going to make it. There's no way we're going to make it.
You are the pilot, and the helicopter's about to run out of fuel. What should you do? Auto rotation. Hover above the sea, cut the engine, and glide down. Controlled ditch. Ride the helicopter into the sea. Total evacuation. Order everyone to jump from the helicopter immediately. Auto rotations over violent waves will be nearly impossible. A total evacuation can jeopardize the crew. They may be injured when the helicopter hits the water. As the pilot, the safest option is a controlled ditch. Lower the helicopter, order the crew to jump, then steer the helicopter away from them.
The whole theory there is that, you know, the people that get out of the helicopter first, they, you know, only one guy's putting himself at high risk.
Arm the floats!
With only 10 minutes before impact, the crew rushes to prepare for the critical hit. Co-pilot Beucke sends out an urgent mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Coast Guard cutter Tamaroa. You can copy our last position. We have 2 minutes to splat.
The Coast Guard cutter Tamaroa picks up the call and tells Beucke they're coming to get them. But already, it's too late.
That's when number 1 engine flamed out due to fuel starvation. So we didn't even have enough gas to go 12 miles. Negative, 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 give them my lat long, we're ditching right here.
With the moment of crisis just minutes away, parajumpers John Spillane and Rick Smith lean out of the helicopter, trying to estimate the size of the massive waves in the pitch dark. In the back of the helicopter, flight engineer Jim Meoli wrestles to prepare the life raft.
I pushed a raft out, and the waves and swells were like this, moving underneath us. And when I pushed it out, the raft fell into this, I call it the abyss, this big black trough, and it inflated, and I was excited about that, but then it just blew away. So I was like, oh man, that sucks. And then I just sat back down on the floor of the helicopter and just said, you know, reserve myself, I'm going in with the helicopter.
Pilot Dave Ruvola shouts the final command to jump, straight into the churning abyss.
We're going down! Egress, egress, egress!
Out, now!
Stood in the doorway, procedure is flip your goggles up so they don't poke your eyes out when you hit the water, couldn't see a damn thing. Turned around, the PJs were in the door behind me. Turned around again, PJs were gone. It's my turn to jump, can't see anything. Then I was able to see the wave tops. Timed my jump into one of the big ones.
3 of the 5-man crew have jumped. Now, pilot Dave Ruvola and flight engineer Jim Meoli hang on as the helicopter careens toward the night sea. Within seconds, the helicopter crashes into the sea, violently jarring both men.
And I was in the back on the floor, unrestrained, and it felt like someone was pushing my head and my whole body into the floor while we're getting bounced around. And then once that all stopped, the waves came in, flushed me out.
Now, each man surfaces to find himself awash in the battering waves and knife-like winds. It will take everything they've got to survive this night in hell.
You can actually hear the big ones coming. To see the power of Mother Nature, it's a very humbling experience, let me tell you.
The waves would come and just beat the crap out of you, and then when you come up, you puke it all up, and then you had to kind of put your head downwind because it was like someone had a fire hose in your face, and the water is just blowing past you like that.
Co-pilot Graham Beucke spots what might be the crew's only hope.
I saw the life raft, went swimming for the life raft, that blew away. There was no way I was going to catch that. I swam like Mark Spitz, but I wasn't going to make it. It just blew away.
It's a 5-man crew, but so far, only 4 have surfaced.
We were still missing Rick.
Rick Smith is a parajumper, one of the most highly trained members of the Air National Guard. He was the first to jump and may have sustained injuries from the fall.
You're out there in the middle of the ocean. You can literally put your hand in front of your face and not even see it.
With the pounding waves, brutal winds, and pitch-black darkness, there's yet an even greater threat. The sea temperature is only 55 degrees. The men may have only 5 hours to survive before hypothermia kills them. For flight engineer Jim Mioli, it could be sooner than that.
One of my mistakes was I had run out to the helicopter and I had my anti-exposure suit. I didn't put it on. My body core temp went down to about 90 degrees.
What's the best way to fight hypothermia? Curl up. Conserve body heat by huddling your limbs close together. Keep moving. Maintain blood circulation by swimming. Float on your back. The less body surface that's underwater, the better. In cold water, movement can actually drain your body of heat. And floating on your back will spread out your body surface, allowing more heat to dissipate. The best thing you can do to survive is to curl up, keeping your head out of the water and your limbs as close to your body as possible. Pilot Dave Ruvola and parajumper John Spillane stay close to Jim Mioli. Co-pilot Graham Beucke, however, is out on his own.
I started swimming in that direction, and it was very exhausting. My body temperature's dropping because the water's so cold. I'm going to exhaust myself and drop my body temperature even further, so I'm just going to stay right here, stay put, and see what happens.
Next, the Coast Guard cutter must battle the winds and breaking waves to rescue the downed helicopter crew. The perfect storm, nearly 1,500 square miles in size, rages through the North Atlantic off the coast of New England. An Air National Guard helicopter rescue team has run out of fuel and is forced to crash their 860 helicopter into massive 8-story waves.
We're going down.
The United States Coast Guard cutter Tamaroa was on its way back to port from a nearly disastrous rescue mission with the Satori sailboat. But they can't ignore this call for help.
The Air National Guard, these people rescue people just like we do. Put all 4 engines on the line, we come up to full speed and we start racing to the scene. Well, racing to the scene would be a relative term because in these weather conditions, we're only making 3 miles per hour. The average speed for walking is 4 miles per hour.
At that rate, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter will take at minimum 4 hours to arrive. For Jim Mioli, who's already showing signs of hypothermia, it may be too late.
I was, not semi-conscious, but incoherent from the hypothermia.
90 minutes after the crash, a Falcon jet from Cape Cod spots the downed crew's strobe lights in the pitch-black night. The Falcon circles the men while an H-3 helicopter hovers overhead. Co-pilot Graham Beucke, who's separated from the others, watches the rescue attempt from the rolling waves.
The Coast Guard helicopter tried to pick up the other guys, H-3. They tried for 45 minutes. And they weren't able to do it.
The winds are too severe for a helicopter rescue. Low on fuel, the H-3 returns to the Coast Guard base while the Falcon continues to circle the stranded men. Their only hope is the Tamaroa, but the storm's catastrophic wind and waves are pummeling the formidable 205-foot cutter.
We're literally going up like one mountain and you're coming down on the mountain on the other side. The rudder and propeller are coming out of the water. It makes it very difficult to steer when you don't have a rudder.
Finally, after 4 hours of struggling to stay afloat and alive, the crew spots hope on the horizon.
As it got closer, you realized it was a Coast Guard cutter. Coast Guard cutter Tamaroa. She was beautiful. The undeniable white paint screen with the big orange stripe on the bow, and she's trying to maneuver towards me. And I just couldn't believe what they were doing with this vessel.
But now, Coast Guard Commander Beucke faces a major dilemma: how to rescue these men without endangering the lives of his own crew.
Don't do anything, people will die. Attempt to rescue, even more people can die. So this was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make.
Without hesitation, 12 men volunteered to put their own lives on the line. They'll use a cargo net to try to save the downed helicopter crew. But this means they'll have to be outside, exposed on deck. One monstrous wave could sweep them all out to sea. You are the cutter commander in these severe storm conditions. How should your men go out on deck? Tethered to the railing, secure them with a rope. Harnessed to a partner. If one slips, the other one will catch him. Keep loose. They need to be free to maneuver. In this daring rescue mission, the men will be moving around, ducking waves and carrying the nets. Tethering them to the railing or harnessing them to each other will inhibit them and even entangle them. Though it's risky, the best option is to keep them loose and untied.
And our rescue team couldn't even walk out to the bow. I mean, they're practically crawling on their hands and knees.
Graham Beucke watches as the cutter rolls closer.
The guys on the ship are yelling. I have my exposure hood on. I can't hear what they're yelling. So I tore the exposure hood off, and they were yelling, swim. The next word was mother. The next word had to do with fornication. And the last word was swim. And that's one of the things that's going to stick in my head forever. I just couldn't believe these kids up there trying to do whatever they could to get me.
The ship rolling so bad, it ended up really more of snagging the person in the net, kind of like hauling a fish up in a net up on the deck. And when we brought the first person up, it turns out it's Graham Beucke, the co-pilot.
How about a blanket for him? Got a blanket for him? We got one coming.
And they just flopped me on the deck. Now I remember Bill Muller talking to me. You all right? You all right? And he said, you vomited, which was happening all night long. But he said the first thing he asked was somebody call my family, tell them I'm all right. And I could hear it over the ship's intercom or the radios that they were carrying. Survivor recovered, survivor recovered. You could hear the kids cheering. That'll stick with me a long time.
Beucke's miraculous rescue motivates the Tamaroa crew to do whatever it takes to save the other downed Air National Guardsmen. But Jim Mioli, who's not wearing his survival suit, is in the throes of severe hypothermia.
Jim was actually going in and out of consciousness. He was in bad shape. His body temperature was down to about 88 degrees.
Next, will this rescue mission turn into a death sentence? The perfect storm is ripping through the North Atlantic, threatening nearly every vessel in its path. 2 a.m., October 31st. The Coast Guard has been making a desperate attempt to save 5 Air National Guardsmen from a disastrous helicopter crash. The Tamaroa, a Coast Guard cutter, struggles to pick up the men with cargo nets. But the massive waves are tossing the ship around like a toy.
We're literally a 1,600-ton cork bobbing in the ocean.
By the time the boat got close enough to us to what we could tell what it was, we were in the bottom of a trough, and there was a wall of water about 50 feet high, and then there's this giant ship on top of that. So we're looking up at it like this, and I'm like, holy cow, what are we gonna do?
Finally, the Tamaroa's cargo net blows within reach for the 3 Air National Guard crewmen.
We grabbed onto the net, and then a wave came, and John Spillane was able to hang on. I fell off, and I'm pretty sure I yanked Dave Rivola with me because I was tied off to him.
John Spillane is safe, though he's suffering from severe internal injuries. Dave Rivola and Jim Mioli, however, are headed straight for disaster.
Myself and Dave, we went along the side of the ship, and then the ship was on a down part of the swell. So we went underneath it in the back. Dave's looking at the propeller, thinking, oh my God, we're gonna shoot up. I'm looking at the bottom of the ship, which is right here. I'm thinking, oh, this is it. You know, we're gonna get smashed.
Immediately, the Coast Guard crew cuts the ship's engine and stops the propellers just in time. Dave Ruvola and Jim Mioli have miraculously surfaced on the other side of the ship. The Tamaroa crew races to throw the nets down to them. This might be their last chance. Mioli's already losing consciousness.
Dave said that he was in my face. Dave, come on, this is it, this is the last thing. He's the one who got me ready for grabbing onto the rope. And they threw the rope over and we grabbed onto it and kind of entangled myself in there, and then they yanked us up.
On board, medics quickly tend to Mioli's hypothermia.
What they do is they take these baked potatoes that are warm and they stick them in your groin and in your armpits, and then they wrap you in this big blanket. And then they stuff me in a bunk.
The cutter crew has fought extreme conditions, risking their own lives to save 4 stranded men.
We've never met them. We don't know who they are. But you have this close bond with them because they go out in conditions like this to rescue other people.
But one member of the Air National Guard crew is still missing.
We had everyone but Rick Smith. Rick was a pararescue jumper. They have the right skill. Rick was one of the best. So we fully expected to find him.
But after a grueling search covering 33,000 square miles, the rescue mission is called off.
It was hard, though, because you come back and you meet your family members, and Rick's not there to meet his.
It was very difficult, very difficult. The hardest thing I ever did was telling my children that their father wasn't coming home.
On October 31st, the storm's fury heads towards land, now affecting the entire eastern coast, from Maine to Florida. But weather forecasters predict that Massachusetts, including Gloucester, will be hardest hit.
I remember having a little bit of a feeling of helplessness.
In this storm, what's the biggest threat to coastal towns? The wind. Downed power lines and water are a lethal combination. The rain. The severe rainfall could lead to flash flood conditions. The tide. A sudden storm surge could sweep people and property offshore. In hurricane-level storms, winds will blow down lines, but power companies typically shut down power to prevent the threat of electrocution. And though the rainfall is severe, it might be short-lived. The biggest onshore threat in a coastal storm are the tides, which can suddenly rise into a storm surge, flooding the area and sweeping people and property out to sea. Massachusetts is hardest hit. Hundreds evacuate, just in time before local roads are damaged. Coastal homes are swept into the sea while winds rip down power lines. The waves batter and destroy boardwalks and seawalls.
Towns were isolated by the storm surge and the waves crashing on shore. People had to be evacuated, rescues were made.
The roads were impassable. There were houses with the walls completely blown out. Furniture was everywhere strewn.
Several Massachusetts counties are declared federal disaster areas.
We were just amazed. We were just stunned by the amount of damage that the storm had done.
Then, on November 2nd, the storm heads north toward Nova Scotia, where it finally dies as it reaches the coast of Newfoundland. The storm has passed, but the tragedy of the missing Andrea Gale and her crew still remains.
There was a number of small boats that saw fish on the Grand Banks. Most of the boats were too small to be there, not just the Andrea Gale. When the weather's bad, they're all too small.
A weather buoy 70 miles east of Sable Island, close to the Andrea Gale's last contact, may provide some insight. A Coast Guard report reveals that at 7 p.m., an hour after Captain Billy Tyne last radioed fellow mariners, the buoy picked up gale force winds of up to 104 miles an hour, kicking up waves to unexpected heights.
We know that 60 miles west of the Andrea Gale, its last known position, that seas, wave heights, basically rose 30 feet in a matter of 3 hours.
What's worse, the waves hit suddenly. In this shallow area surrounding Sable Island and the Grand Banks, the sandy banks caused the waves to trip and break, relentlessly pummeling anything in their path. The Andrea Gale may never have had a chance.
I think that, you know, the boat was just in a bad place at the wrong time. And it just got overpowered by the seas, took too much water on deck, and listed it over and just couldn't recover.
Although the fishing boat was doomed, the crew may still have had a chance. Like most vessels of the time, they had on board a battery-powered device called an EPIRB, short for Emergency Positioning Indicating Radio Beacon. If a boat sinks and the EPIRB is turned on, it can send out a distress signal with the boat's location. Unfortunately, for the crew of the Andrea Gale, the EPIRB wasn't turned on.
If the boat capsizes or goes down, the EPIRB deploys, it starts to transmit. We know there's a problem. The EPIRBs are registered to that boat.
The Andrea Gale did have a manually controlled EPIRB on board, so why didn't the Coast Guard receive any distress signals? On November 6th, the answer washes up on Sable Island, the area where the storm first passed through.
But the day that they found the EPIRB, that was kind of unsettling because it was on the off position.
The fact that the EPIRB was working but was not turned to the on position may be grim proof of the unexpected fury of this monstrous weather system. The Andrea Gale crew likely had no idea that they were about to collide with a gigantic and vicious storm. Their story is a stoic reminder that the wrath of the sea is sometimes impossible to escape.
I think of him every day. I walk down that boulevard and I think this is a memorial to my brother and to many people that I know. And before, I think I kind of took it for granted, the meaning of the fisherman's statue and the fisherman's memorial. But now I'll never take it for granted.
In the end, the perfect storm of 1991 cost $208 million in property damage and took 12 lives, including the men of the Andrea Gale and parajumper Rick Smith, who was aboard the Air National Guard H-60 helicopter that crashed into the sea. It's a storm that will be remembered as one of coastal New England's most bizarre and destructive weather phenomenons ever recorded. The strange collision of three weather systems, Hurricane Grace from the south, the Canadian cold front from the west, and the low-pressure system off Sable Island, creating a mega ocean storm of stunning proportions, whipping the sea into a frenzy of 100-foot waves and winds of nearly 120 miles an hour. For the forecasters and rescuers whose survival instincts were challenged and who had to make critical, life-and-death decisions, the perfect storm is a warning that nature can be unpredictable and unmerciful.